Hello. How are we all? Good? Great. Just a quick one today because I've had an idea. Let me explain. It was my birthday recently and my sister gave me this absolutely stunning, gorgeous copy of Sense Sensibility. We love Jane Austen in my household, so I was very excited to read this. Well, reread it because I've already read it before. And then I was thinking, it's been a long time since I read some Jane Austen. And then I was thinking, I can't really remember a lot of the details of these novels. And so I had an idea. And my idea is, over the rest of this year, I'm going to reread or read for the first time some Jane Austen novels. Some that I own already, paperback or hardback, and some that are on my Kindle. I'm pretty sure, like, classics are free because I have a lot of Jane Austen novels on my Kindle. So I think they are free. Just a little tip. But yeah, I was thinking about how I can't really remember a lot of them as clearly as I would like to, apart from things like Pride and Prejudice, but that's because I've watched the BBC miniseries so many times that story is just never leaving my brain. And I remember reading it for the first time and being like, this is the best book I've ever read. So I'm looking forward to going back to that one. The one I read most recently was Emma, which I love. But I think I'm going to make a little series out of it because, as we know, I love talking about books, and Jane Austen in particular, I absolutely adore. So this is the plan. I wrote it down. So I'm going to read a bunch of Jane Austen novels over the year. I'm going to talk about the plot, so there will be spoilers. Just saying. Go through the plot, some of the characters, the key themes, things like that. Just basically everything that makes the novel so fantastic. And then I'm going to do some research as well on the novel. So not just the actual story itself, but also, the timeline of Jane Austen's life, where she was at when she wrote it. What are the key themes? What was the impact that it had on society at the time? What are some of the different interpretations that people have had over time? And then I want to look at how this novel in particular has influenced literature, but also storytelling and authors and creatives as a whole since it was written. And think about, the link between that book and our contemporary society. Why is it still relevant? How are the themes still relatable? These characters, why do we love them so much? Why do we keep coming back to these stories? And why you should read it. I'm a big believer in the importance of education and books and literature and reading classic literature and reading books that have stood the test of time and asking why, how can we learn from them, how can we keep gleaning more and more from them. I think it's super important. I think it's a really important thing to do. I think that actually when you break down some of these classic novels, and sometimes when they are presented to you in a form that might be a little bit more palatable, like a film or a TV show if you're not a big reader, then it becomes abundantly clear that these stories, even though they're written in a language that we don't necessarily use, even though the themes and the worlds that they are in aren't necessarily ones that we can relate to very closely right now, these stories are interesting and classics for a reason and beloved and worth your time. So I'm going to be talking about that. I'm also going to go through some of the film and TV show adaptations of some of these novels and kind of talk about whether I think they did a good job, where I think they are lacking or wanting, and whether I think you should watch the adaptation, whether that's because it was done really well, and especially if you're not a big reader, whether that's an easy way to access these stories. But also, even if I think it's done atrociously, maybe I would still recommend it just to check it out and consider why it's so bad and what I think it missed in terms of the core themes of the novel. I have a feeling I'm going to have a lot to say because all of these stories, they're all important. It always makes me think of that quote from Little Women, the film, the 2019 Greta Gerwig film, where I think it's Amy says to Jo, like, writing them is what makes them important. A big thing with Jane Austen is, like, she was writing in this time where a lot of the novels weren't so grounded in realism. Like her novels are sometimes like drawing room dramas where, like, the plot moves forward with conversation rather than action. This was like society and social standing, and a lot of the time women talking to each other. And I think it's really important to read. So I'm very excited to get into this series. The first one I'm going to read is Sense and Sensibility, thanks to this beautiful copy that I have, and I can't wait. For now, I read this very briefly. I hope the glare's not too much. Basically, it's this very, very short book that's just a bunch of like facts and quotes from Jane Austen. And I have marked out a few of them that I wanted to share just to like, it's a little taster into Jane Austen before we get started into it. I can't open a single page. Okay. So with the introductions, I just thought this was really funny that they wrote this. With her interests, it's not hard to imagine Austen fitting in with her modern day peers on TikTok. Indeed, if she'd been alive today, chances are she'd have been a top influencer with her forward-thinking ideas around feminism, gender roles, and education. A quote from Emma. I just think this is really lovely. It's Mr. Knightley talking to Emma. If I loved you less, I might be able to talk about it more. Jane, you. Oh, here's a fun fact. Jane was one of the first writers to capture the female gaze in her writing, a theme explored by journalist Megan Garber. For example, in Pride and Prejudice, Elizabeth Bennet is the subject and Mr. Darcy is the object of Elizabeth's gaze. For a long time, the inner thoughts and observations of women had never been considered, but Jane changed all this with her wit and charm. See, it's just so fun, you know? Okay, here's another quote from aforementioned Elizabeth Bennet. One may be continually abusive without saying anything just, but one cannot be always laughing at a man without now and then stumbling on something witty. Oh, okay, so here's some trivia. When Jane Austen was writing her novels, women were thought to be fair and fragile. Well, the right sort of woman was anyway. With this in mind, what was a woman expected to do when confronted with foul language? A. Faint. B. Unleash her own swear words. C. Cry. As much as I wish it was B, it's A. Faint. Isn't that crazy? Wait, is it? Page 74. Oh my god. Page 74. A. Yep. Faint. She was supposed to faint. I think that's kind of funny. Imagine if nowadays, like, every time someone swore in your vicinity, you just fainted. You just dropped to the floor. I think that's kind of funny. So this is Caroline Bingley on Elizabeth Bennet. To walk 3 miles or 4 miles or 5 miles or whatever it is above her ankles in dirt and alone, quite alone. What could she mean by it? It seems to me to show an abominable sort of conceited independence, a most country town indifference to decorum. Oh, Caroline, you're so funny. Love you. Just kidding. You're really annoying a lot of the time. You're a product of your time. And so we forgive you because you don't know any better than to sneer upon your fellow. Okay, thank God, found the next fact. Jane's best friend and favourite person to gossip with was her sister Cassandra. Hundreds of letters passed between the two, documenting Jane's thoughts on love, life, society, and their mutual family and friends. While a few of the letters remain, Cassandra, who was fiercely protective of Jane, burned hundreds of Jane's letters after she died in order to keep them secret and protect friends and family members from finding out how they'd been mocked by the witty writer. I think that's so funny. Okay, last quote from Caroline Bingley. How pleasant it is to spend an evening in this way. I declare, after all, there is no enjoyment like reading. How much sooner one tires of anything than of a book. When I have a house of my own, I shall be miserable if I have not an excellent library. So true, Caroline, so true. So that's a fun little intro to Jane Austen. Very cute. This is Jane Austen, A Treasure Trove by Constance Moore. So yep, that's the plan. I'm going to read these novels kind of over the course of the whole year. I'll check back in once I've hung out with the Dashwoods some more. But for now, goodbye. Goodbye. Bye-bye now. Bye. All right.